This is part 3 of my cider making series. We're going to get to this point in the video today, which is where I've bottled the cider, and there have been some interesting surprises along the way. We're going to have a look at all of that process. We're also going to cook with some of the leftover cider, and we'll taste the bottle that I laid up in part 1. Okay, it's been a whole week since I set this cider fermenting. It's still bubbling away. It has slowed down, but it's still fermenting. I think it's cleared a little bit as well. The colour has darkened. It's less cloudy. Well, also there's more sediment in the bottom here. Some of that will be yeast, some of that will be the apple solids settling out. And there's been a small drop in volume. That's to be expected, because in there the sugar is being digested by the yeast. It's being consumed by the yeast. Now, if the yeast had enough oxygen, they would fully metabolize that sugar, and the waste products would be carbon dioxide and water, and there'd be no cider. But because the air is excluded by this airlock, oxygen is excluded. So the yeast is working anaerobically, which means it can't completely break down that sugar. And so it breaks it down partially, and partially broken down sugar is alcohol, ethanol, mostly, hopefully. There will be some proportion of other things in there, including methanol, actually, because that's a natural thing you get in wines and ciders anyway. It's only a problem if you concentrate it. Anyway, I've got to carry on waiting for this to stop fermenting. Hopefully it will clear. I will make a decision on whether I'm going to rack it off into other containers once it's stopped bubbling. Get it off the yeast, off the lees, because if you leave it on the lees for too long you can get a weird yeasty taste in the cider. We'll make decisions about that as we go along, but for the moment it's still working and we've got to just be patient. It's now been about 2.5 weeks since I set this cider fermenting here. It's time to rack this off. It hasn't cleared yet, but it has finished fermenting. It's very, very slow in terms of the bubbles it's producing, like one every 20 minutes or so. So we're going to rack this today. Racking comprises decanting it into clean, these are clean sterilised demijohns. The ones in my studio which are fermenting have got quite a bit of headspace. I'm going to transfer it into these and fill them as full as I dare, because I don't expect very much further fermentation. That does mean I'm going to end up with about half of a demijohn left. So that's going to go straight into bottles, and I'll seal them and we'll see what happens. They may do a further fermentation phase in the bottles. They might clear in here, in which case there'll be sediment, and they may carbonate themselves. Anyway, the siphon pump, by the way, interestingly, has got, well, it came with this little filter attachment. I don't think that's suitable for filtering these things. For one thing, I don't think it'll even go in some of these demijohns, but also I don't think the mesh there is fine enough to exclude yeast. I think that might be intended for if you use this pump for an aquarium. This is a new pump, by the way, but I have sterilised it. Okay, we've got a wide shot here because I just set the camera up so I don't have to fiddle with that while we're working, because this will proceed apace once it gets going. So I'm just going to get a bit of masking tape ready. All of my surfaces, by the way, have been sanitised as well. So one of the things people said in the last video is I put the airlock down on the surface, contaminating it, but I've sanitised everything. Obviously my hands are not gloved or anything like that, but I've been sterilising all of these things, so they're about as clean as they can be. I've moved these fermentation vessels down from the studio, disturbing them as little as possible, and I'm going to just feed this tube into here and try and get it so that it stops short of the sediment. So something like that. And hopefully that's taped in place, that won't pick up the sediment. And then there we go. Once that's going, it doesn't need any further pumping, so just so you can see what's going on. Now this will be slightly aerating the brew again, which is not ideal. So I might just allow that to run down the side like that to minimise that a little bit. And I'm expecting that this will make quite a pale cider, because these are not cider apples, these are just dessert apples and cooking apples. So there are none of the tannic cider apples in the mix. Proper cider apples are usually red skinned, very tannic to taste. You couldn't eat them as a fresh apple, they'd be disgusting. And that tannin gives cider its dark colour in those sorts of ciders. This cider is just made from a mixture of dessert and cooking apples, and therefore it doesn't contain so many of those tannins, and thus it's going to be a pale cider. If I moved this jar down a bit further, we'd get a bit better drainage, because the difference between the top of the pipe and the bottom of the pipe is not huge here. So this will drain that vessel, but it will also not fill up this one, because obviously we're stopping short of that sediment layer at the bottom. Now what I'm going to do now, just while we've got this siphon running, is adjust that pipe so that we get the maximum amount of cider out of here. Maybe just tip that a little bit. I've noticed I've just sucked up a little bit of sediment, but hopefully that won't matter a whole lot. Okay, that's pretty efficient, I would say. We've not really wasted very much there. So that's now got minimal sediment in it, apart from what's still in suspension. So now this vessel, I'm just going to set that aside. The yeast sediment here is not going to go to waste. We're going to make some Marmite style thing. Right, I'll only go about halfway down on this one, because I've only got to fill this vessel to the top. Okay, we're getting close now, so I'm going to just stand by on this tube. And when we get to about the neck here, I'm just going to pull it out at this end, and then it will drain down. There. Okay, and then that airlock can go on there. So there we go, that's one demijohn of racked cider. That's mission successful so far. Now I need to go fairly well down, as before. Just secure that in place. So something like that, and then we're going to go into this one. And again, I'm going to put that on the floor so it drains faster. Meanwhile, there is a tiny little bit of cider in here. Now, this is probably technically scrumpy at this point, because it's only partially, it's not cleared or anything. However, it smells like cider. It tastes like cider. It's very dry. Dry as in the opposite of sweet. Because this was only 11.5% sugar, the yeast will just ferment right through that sugar, and there'll be just no sweetness left. That's normal for cider. In fact, if you want sweet cider, you have to kind of stop it before it finishes fermenting, or kill it and then add more sweetness. We're going to stop there. So that's vessel number 2 complete. Now number 3. I don't know if this one looks darker to you than the others did. It is, because this is the third vessel. So when I originally prepared the apple juice, there wasn't quite enough to fill 3 demijohns. So I had to pasteurize some more apple juice in a smaller pan and top this one up. And it's different. Now before we get to the end of this, we're going to fill that one that's on the floor down there. So I've also got these bottles, and I'm going to fill up at least one of these bottles. And we'll try bottling it when it's cloudy. But also if there's a bit left over, I've still got my glass here, so there's that option as well. So again, we're getting close, so I'll just lift that up to slow down the speed of siphoning. But when this is full, instead of stopping it, I've got to get the end in here. This is where it gets fun, and potentially messy, which is why I've got the tray here. That's good. Okay, into there. So now that airlock can go in there. And that vessel's full. I'll get another bottle ready just in case. I think we're only going to fill one bottle actually, looking at the rate it's going. So the surplus is going to be just one bottle plus a little bit. That works for me though. Yeah, there's definitely not enough left in that demijohn there for another bottle. Okay, let's fill that up there, and then we get to there, and then we get that on. And then let's see how much more we can get out of here. Okay, that's going to do it. Right, I'm just going to get cleaned up here and then we'll see where we got to. So there is the yield. We've got 2 nicely filled demijohns of racked cider. That can now sit as long as it needs to clear out. Hopefully it will clear. We might get a little bit more sediment then at the bottom, and then it can be siphoned into bottles to be nice, clear, golden cider. We've got one bottle which is going to be an interesting experiment to see what that one does. I'm going to leave that for a few weeks and then we'll open it and see what it's like. Plus nearly a pint of leftover cider. What a shame. It's a very dry cider, but quite drinkable. No noticeable yeast taint there, which is good because I think we got it off the lees quick enough. Not a bad cider. It doesn't taste strong at all, but then it would only be 6% maybe. So for cider, that's not especially strong. Tastes good though. Like I say, quite acidic. I think there were quite a lot of cooking apples in there. But assuming this keeps as long as next summer, that's going to be quite refreshing on a hot summer day. Plus we've also then got this yeast sludge, which is going to be part 3, because this yeast, which is quite a lot of it in there, well, it's mostly yeast. It will also be some apple solids. This is going to be saved, and I'm going to make my own something like Marmite. Anyway, assessment of this cider at this stage of development. By the way, I've already drunk half a pint of that. It is very dry. It hasn't got a huge amount of character, and that is because of the aforementioned absence of cider varieties in the apple mix. So it just, I won't say it tastes watered down, it just doesn't taste massively cidery. It's quite a light, fresh apple cider. It's definitely alcoholic. I haven't got the means to measure the alcohol in there, apart from the fact that we did refractometry on the apple juice. It was 11.5% sugar, which should mean this is about 6.5%, maybe 7% alcohol. But my unscientific assessment of this, I would say probably 5 or 6% alcohol. I've drunk half a pint of it. I can start to feel the effect of alcohol on my system. I don't suppose this is going to get any more interesting to drink as it matures and as it clears and so on. So I think we are going to end up with a very light, very dry cider. I don't mind that. Then there were 2. So these 2 demijohns are now going to sit here for as long as it takes for that cider to clear, if it does, and for fermentation to completely cease. Interestingly, the agitation that this has gone through has obviously woken up that yeast a little bit, and it did start bubbling again, just not very quickly, but there is clearly a little bit more fermentation going on in there. So anyway, that's going to sit there for several weeks now. This bottle, however, is not going to be trusted because it is sealed. In theory, that rubber seal should give before the bottle goes boom, but just in case, it's going to go into my containment system. Same containment system I used for my nettle beer, which worked just fine. And actually these bottles of beer have self-carbonated like this, and it's turned out to be quite a nice ale. So it's been a month or so since I racked this cider. Fermentation has more or less ceased, although there is evidence of slightly higher pressure inside the vessel. There is no sign that it's going to clear at all. It doesn't look like this cloudiness is going to settle out. Now there are things I could do about that. I could add some finings or something to flocculate the cloudiness and settle it out, but I don't care enough to do that. I think I'm probably just going to have cloudy cider, which I don't mind. Interestingly though, the bottle, when I racked it, we had these 2 vessels plus 3/4 of a pint glass plus a full bottle. Now the bottle, where it's probably continued fermenting in the glass and it's under pressure, and so it will be carbonating, is showing evidence of clearing. Let's go and just have a look at that. So here's the bottle, And yeah, at the top there you can see it is ever so slightly clearing. So yeah, maybe when I finally bottle the cider, it might clear in the bottles and have a sediment layer, which will be interesting because that probably gets stirred back up again when you open them. So anyway, I'm going to cool it and I think bottle the cider soon. But first, something just to make it a little bit more interesting. So we need to bottle that cider. Now, as we experienced when racking it, it hasn't got a lot of character, and that's just because of the apples it's been made from. But we can do something about that. So I'm going to make some fruit skin extracts to put in the bottles, which will have a little bit of sugar in them as well, and that will bottle condition the cider. So the little bit of sugar that's in there will restart fermentation, and that will put some gas into the cider to make it carbonated. But it will also hopefully give it a little bit of character. So I've got some lovely dark red apples. These are quite tannic. We're going to have the skins off of these. They say that if you've managed to peel an apple like this in one piece without breaking the skin, you can throw it over your shoulder and the peel will form the initials of your future lover on the floor. So these, nice sweet apple, but the peel, yeah, peel's got a little bit of bitterness and tannic properties in it, which is exactly what I want for my cider. Because normally if you make cider from cider apples, which is not what I did, I used dessert and cooking varieties. But if you use cider fruits, you use cider varieties, then you get all of these tannins. And when all the sugar ferments, you still get some interesting flavours in the cider. So that's going to go into a saucepan, just enough water to cover it. And I'm going to simmer that to try to extract the flavours and colour from these apple skins. I also have these. So these are Bullis plums. Well, actually, they might be a hybrid between Bullises and Sloes. They are small, bitter plums, a bit like damsons. Flesh inside is green, but it turns red when it's ripe. I actually just want the skins. So there we go. That's just mostly the skins of the Bullises, fruit and pips, and a few fruits that weren't actually quite so nice there. And again, just cover them with water. Well, you can see colour came out of them straight away. But again, I'm going to simmer these to extract the flavour out of the skins. Now, you might be wondering, why not just do this together with the apples? I could, but I want to monitor what's happening with each one of these different things. So this apple skin has been going about 10 minutes, and you can see it has extracted some colour. Let's have a little taste and see what flavours we've extracted. Oh yes, definitely a tannic mouthfeel to that. Quite a nice apple aroma as well, but a definite tannic tang in there. The Bullises have not been going quite so long, but look at the colour. And this is why my purple jam was purple. Well, one of the reasons my purple jam was purple is it had Bullises in there. Of course, it had blackberries and elderberries as well. But look at that colour. So, a little taste of that as well, I think. Different sort of fruitiness, plummy fruitiness, obviously. But, again, a nice little tannic tang to it. That's good. This is what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to cook those for a little bit longer and strain them. I'm also going to cook some blackberries and elderberries. And this batch of cider, or some of it anyway, is going to be what I'm going to call jam finish. So it will have all of these fruit extracts in it. No added sugar, except what's in the fruit. I think we're ready to strain those Bullis skins now. I'm not going to force it at all through the sieve. I'm just going to let it drip because I really only want juice. I don't want pulp. We will rinse out the pan with a bit of the juice from the apples. And then the apple pieces are going to go on top there, which will wash out some more of the extract from the Bullises. Good stuff. In addition to the apple and Bullis skin extracts, we're going to have in this pan a little splash of water, not much. That's actually probably too much. Frozen blackberries, frozen elderberries, and then those are going to go on And again, just simmer until the juice comes out. Now, unlike the bullaces and apples, I am cooking these together because I know exactly what these will do. I know what blackberries and elderberries taste like. So I haven't added any more liquid to this apart from that tiny little splash of water that was in there initially. And look at the juice coming out of here now. And the colour of it as well. So there is a commercial brand of, dare I say it, industrial cider called Strongbow that has a dark fruits variety. And I have no idea how they actually make that. Notionally, it's got blackcurrants or blackberries or something in it. I imagine the process to be a little bit more industrial than what we're doing here. So that blackberry and elderberry mix is now just going to go into there. I'm not going to force it again. I'm just straining it to get the juice out. And I've only cooked those fruits long enough to just burst them. I'm not trying to mash them down and get the pulp out. When that's finished dripping through, we'll have a little taste of the resulting mixture. So this is the juice that's going to be flavouring my cider. Well, I'm going to be dosing into the bottles when I bottle it, some of them. Let's have a taste of that. I'm expecting this to be quite sour. Actually, it's not, but it's got lots of flavours in there. So yeah, that's the plan. I will probably, when we come to bottle the cider, I will just boil that down to half of its, reduce it down to half its volume, concentrate the sugars and flavours, and also so that we're not diluting the cider too much. I'm going to bottle this cider today, and in addition to my jam finish, which is just reducing over there, I've also got some nice heather honey. This is a really nice, strongly honey flavoured honey, and that might sound silly, but heather honey has got a really distinct honey aroma. So some of my bottles are going to be jam finish, some are going to be honey finish, some I will just put a little bit of white sugar in so we get the pure cider flavour. I'll label the bottles obviously, although I think the jam finish will be fairly obvious. So my honey finish bottles are going to get 15 grams of this honey in each one. I've just warmed it ever so gently just to make it flow. So I've got 3 bottles like that, and these are going to get labelled straight away so that we don't get confused. Similarly, but also different, my jam finish bottles are going to get a little bit more of this juice because obviously it's not quite such a potent thing as honey. So this will dilute the cider in these, but not by much. So I've zeroed the scales. Let's actually see what I think is the right amount of this jam mixture. I'm going to say 50 grams in each bottle. To zero the scales each time because these bottles are not all exactly alike. I think 3 of each of those different finishes will be fine. I don't know how many bottles I'm going to get out of these demijohns. I've only got 10 bottles sterilised and washed, but I'm confident that will be plenty for at least one of them. And we'll know when the first one's empty how many bottles we need in total. Time to decant. Right, that's the sucky end. The tube in, and I'm going to try to go again so that it's just above the small amount of sediment that has actually settled out. And then secure that in place. So we'll fill the honey finish first. And here it comes. Right, so that's the first bottle. Nearly done. Go on to the second one. About there. And then cap on the first one. And sealed. So that's number 1 done. So that's 2 bottles and we're about 2/3 done. So I reckon it's going to be 6 bottles per, 5 to 6 bottles per demijohn. So I might need a couple more bottles. Ready with the next one. This one's going to be the spectacular one because it's got some colour in it. Okay, and there. So yeah, that's going to have some interesting colour to it. That will be interesting, won't it? Certainly there's enough in there to make a difference. Now sadly we're not going to get to taste these jam and honey finished ciders in this video because these are going to have to sit in the bottles now for probably another month before they condition and the sugar ferments and put some gas into the cider. But we can taste the bottle that I decanted when we racked the cider, which I think should have naturally conditioned a little bit anyway. Okay, and then that into there. Right, I think that's just going to fill that. And so I will stop at the end of this bottle. Yeah, I think that's it, 6 bottles per demijohn. So that's my jam and my honey finish ciders done. So we've got one more demijohn, that's another 6 bottles there. And we've got this little bit of residue here, which I will probably just put in a jug and use in cooking sometime. If we're cooking some pork or something, I'll just tip that in and we'll have pork with cider. So the yield, I did 2 more bottles of jam finish, so 5 in total. 1 more bottle of honey finish, so 4 in total. And then 3 just regular cider. I put about half a teaspoon of sugar in each of those bottles. So that's, I suppose we could call that sugar finish, but anyway, that will just help with the carbonation. Plus about a pint of what I'm going to call cooking cider, which is the dregs, which, you know, it's got all of the stuff that settled out during racking. It smells, actually, it's got the fruity ester smell, a bit like pear drops. That is just going to go in the fridge. We'll use that in cooking. I think that will happen in this video. We can't taste any of these because they need to sit now for at least a month before they'll be carbonated and ready to drink. Okay, this is weird. A few hours after bottling this cider, the regular ones and the jam finish, nothing weird has happened. The honey finish, the honey is actually clearing the cider. All of the cloudiness is settling out in that. So the honey has done something to the cider to flocculate or clump up the whatever was making it cloudy, the yeast or the apple solids in there, and cause it to settle out. If I'd known it was going to do that, I might have added the honey into the fermentation vessels and used it like vinings before siphoning it off. Now, I don't think there's anything to do now. I don't really want to try to decant these into new bottles, or else they'll get too aerated and they might turn to vinegar. So yeah, I cannot stress how weird that is. That's had a chance to sit overnight, and look how clear that's gone now. Compared to one of the just sugar finish bottles there, which hasn't settled at all. So there is something in heather honey that makes that happen. If I'd only known that before I bottled it, I would have done that in the demijohn, and we'd have bottled some clear cider with no sediment. I'm hoping that sediment will just cake so that I can pour the cider out when I serve this without those clumps coming back up. It'll probably have to be poured gently in one motion. But yeah, the sugar finish and the jam finish hasn't done anything of the sort, and that remains cloudy, and that's fine. But yeah, this is just a big surprise to me. Most of those need to sit for that tertiary fermentation to take place, so I'll just put them to one side and we'll wait for that. So there will be a part 4 to this series where, or maybe it'll come in some random stuff video, where we'll open the jam finish and the honey finish and give those a proper taste. To make use of this leftover, this is the dregs of the cider making process, we're going to make a nice pork with apple and cider casserole. So I've got the cider, I've got about 40 grams of pearl barley, I've got some pork shoulder steaks, bay leaves, an onion, a stock cube, celery, salt and pepper, thyme. This is actually thyme that I brought back from Spain. There's going to be a video on this on its own. And mustard. So my biggest pan on the heat and a bit of oil in there. The olive oil. So we don't need a lot of oil because the fat is going to render out the pork here. This pork, I'm just going to dredge it in a little bit of flour before it goes in the oil. This will just help with it forming a crust, but also this flour will thicken the sauce we're going to make later on. You can mix up your flour with your herbs and seasonings and things and then dip the pork things in it, but then you're wasting a lot of herbs and seasonings. So I prefer to just do it like this, just shake a little bit of flour on there before those go in the pan. I'm just going to pause a moment here and wait for the pan to come back up to temperature before I put the last 2 in, just so that we don't crowd the pan. While that's happening, we can go and chop up the onion and celery. So nothing fancy. So I've just added the other 2 pork chops into the pan once it came back up to temperature. So anyway, onion just coarsely diced like that. Celery is going to be slow cooked, so the celery and onion are going to pretty much cook down into the sauce. Now we've got all 6 of those pork steaks in here. Let's just have a look and see what they're doing. So yep, they've got some lovely browning on the bottom there, that's flavour. So now I'm just going to flour this side and turn them over. These vegetables, celery and onion, are going to go in kind of on top. Jiggle them around a little bit, just so they can find their way down to the pan in between the pork chops. Okay, so that's just going to continue browning until the other side's done as well. It's also not a bad time to get a bit of seasoning in there. Salt, black pepper. Yep, they're taking a bit of browning on the underside now, so they're nearly ready to come out. So, slow cooker vessel over here. And those chops are just going to go in there like that. This is going to be enough for notionally 6 people. There's 6 nice big pork steaks here, or 4 hungry people, or 2 ravenous people. Just going to continue browning the onions and celery in that pan for a moment. Bay leaves straight into that. I'm using fresh bay leaves. Fresh bay leaves versus dried bay leaves that have been on the shelf, massive difference. I know a lot of people say that bay leaves don't do anything. If you've never tried them fresh, this is straight off the tree in the garden. If you've never tried them fresh, you haven't tasted bay leaves. The pearl barley can go in there. The thyme, I didn't want to put this in here in case it gets burned, but we'll have about a teaspoonful of lovely dried thyme, a little bit more maybe. I think we're now ready to deglaze this pan using the cider dregs, or some of it anyway. So I'm just going to dissolve all those little crusty bits off of here. It's not exactly a fond because this is a non-stick pan, but even a non-stick pan does acquire some little bits of crusty fond on there. So heat can go off. That lot is going to go into the slow cooker vessel. We're not quite done though, so back over there. This mustard, this is just dry English mustard. I'm going to have a teaspoonful of that in there. Mustard powder, such as this, you get the best flavour from it if you activate it. Usually you'd mix that with a little bit of vinegar. I'm just going to use cider. So with dry mustard, if you just put it straight into your dish, you will get a mustard flavour, but you won't get a full mustard flavour. There is a chemical or enzymatic process that has to happen, and usually that happens when the dry mustard powder is wetted. That brings out the pungency and the full aromas of the mustard. So that's going to sit aside for just half an hour or something to start that process. The stock cube can go in now, which is going to give us most of the salt this recipe requires. I'm probably only going to put 3/4 of this stock cube in to start with, and we'll use the rest of it as seasoning when we taste later on. Rest of the cider, a little bit of water just to keep it topped up, and that's it. So that's now going to go in slow cooker for maybe 6 hours or something like that. Now, cooking pork in the presence of acidic solutions, so tomato juice is a good one. In this case, a nice dry cider. Wine would also work. Really tenderises it. So that goes in there. That will go on high for the moment. There is an auto setting on this, but I prefer to leave it on high until I see it bubbling, and then I'll turn it down to low. So I do the process the auto thing is doing, but I do it manually. So there are a couple more things. So in about half an hour, I'll add that mustard into the mix once that's just had a chance to work. And then about an hour out from the end of cooking, I'm just going to tip in a tin of butter beans, and I will slice up a couple of apples and put some apple wedges in there as well. About half an hour has elapsed. I'm going to add this mustard in now. So, as I say, the mustard powder, the pungency will grow over time, and it peaks and then it tails off. If you're using obviously ready-made mustard, all of that is moot. But if you use mustard powder, then you get to control the pungency. So if you just put the mustard straight into your hot mix, then you will get the mustard flavour but not much of the pungency. If you leave it to work with some vinegar or white wine or something, then the pungency will increase over a period of hours. So yeah, I've just left it for half an hour just to get a little bit of mustard punch. Okay, that's bubbling away nicely now, so I'm going to turn that on to low now. And a bit of an afterthought, I'm going to add some saffron, the red string spice herb. So just some strands of saffron that I've soaked in a little bit of water for half an hour. I think that'll go nicely with everything else that's going in here. We're about an hour out from the end of cooking. I've just got these apples, and these are going to go in wedges. These came from a friend, different friend from the one who gave me the bags of apples for the apple pie. What a joy it is to have lots of generous friends with apple trees. Just going to cut these into wedges like this. Just cut the core out, and then just chunky pieces like that. So each apple, large apples, into 8 pieces. So these just go in like that. Getting them under the liquid will stop them from going brown. While we're here, the butter beans. Okay, and the other apple. So that's 2 apples, 2 large apples in there. And that's just going to simmer very, very gently now for another hour. The beans really just need to warm through, but they will absorb a little bit of flavour from the stew. The apples will just cook to tender, but still with a tiny bit of crunch, I hope. Also at this point, we will just have a little taste of that sauce for seasoning. It's nice, about the right consistency. So it's been thickened by that flour and that barley. Little taste for seasoning. I mean, I could add a bit more salt, but I think I'm going to leave that to the individual diners. There is going to be salt and pepper on the table. Okay, now to serve this, I've just got some really lovely coarsely mashed potatoes with butter. This is how we like our mashed potatoes in this household, with lots of little nooks and crannies to absorb gravy. Some steamed vegetables, and the pork. It's probably going to break up when it comes out. Yes, because it's just gone so tender. I'll have a bit of apple, and then some of this lovely sauce. Okay, well, there we go. Pork with cider. Let's get that to the table and give it a taste. Okay, right. I'll pour drinks in a minute. Do you want to have a little taste of the pork and let me know what you think of that? And that cider, despite being quite dry, is really mellowed in the cooking. What do you reckon, Jenny? Good? Nice. Right. So, this is the bottle of cider that I put in the bottle when I racked the cider about a month ago. I don't know if it's going to be sparkling or not. Do you want to try a little bit, Jenny?
Just a little bit.
Okay, I've got some just plain apple juice just to sweeten it. Let's see if we get a pop. No, not much of a pop, so it hasn't fermented further. Oh, there's a little fizz there. Okay, I'll give you that bit to taste. Is that right? Mm. It's very tangy, quite dry. And so I'm going to put some, This is just pressed apple juice. This is the last of the apple juice that we had in the freezer. So we'll just cut it with a bit of that. Let's try it like that. So that's now more like a sweet cider. But it's a lot more drinkable like that.
Yeah, it is.
So that's part 3 of the cider journey. We'll be back with part 4 sometime in December probably, when all of those other bottle ciders are ready. But for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.